Look past the raw tribal hysteria flooding your feeds today. The Supreme Court has officially struck down the executive order upholding birthright citizenship in a historic 6-3 decision. Today, here at the Church of the Romanesco Broccoli, I review separate perspectives left, right, black, Asian, and indigenous, male, female to audit the true molecular architecture of the flora. But before we look at the clips, let us look at the sky. The mainstream talking heads want you to panic over a line in the dirt, completely blind to the fact that if a foreign aircraft is cruising at 30,000 feet over American soil and a child is born in said aircraft, that infant is automatically, legally, a United States citizen under the flag. The law is mathematical, the geography is absolute, and the political panic is pure balderdash. Let's audit the matrix.
People make birthright citizenship sound way more complicated than it is. Here's the rule. If you're born in the United States, you're usually a U.S. citizen. That idea comes from the 14th Amendment, and it was added after the Civil War to make citizenship clear and to stop the government from picking and choosing who counted. So if a baby is born here, that baby is generally a U.S. citizen no matter who the parents are. There are a few rare exceptions like children of foreign diplomats, but those are exceptions, not the rule. And the Supreme Court backed that up a long time ago in a case called Wong Kim Ark. Now, the reason that you're hearing about this again is that the Supreme Court heard arguments on April 1st, 2026 over President Trump's order trying to restrict birthright citizenship. Lower courts blocked that move, so the issue went back up to the justices. Early reporting says that justices across the court sounded skeptical of the administration's argument, and a decision is expected by June 2026. So the simplest way to remember it is, born here, citizen here.
Oh man, white Trump supporters are going to be mad at this one. It is upheld. Children of immigrants, including those unlawfully in the United States, are citizens of the United States if they are born in its jurisdiction, which is of course very upsetting. If you guys have been following the whole birthright citizenship drama recently, naturally Donald Trump and the Republicans are pretty upset about the current decision because, well, it's protecting something that's long-standing. If you are an immigrant of this country, regardless if you are an illegal, if you have children here, your children have the same rights as any other citizen inside the United States. This should have been a no-brainer to anybody who has ever read the Constitution, but white conservatives, they don't know how to fucking read.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the news I've been waiting for, baby. This is the main case I've been waiting for. I've been standing at the door waiting for this case, and it has just been reported that the Supreme Court is going to uphold that 14th Amendment. Absolutely, which means that Trump lost. Okay, birthright citizenship is and shall be what it originally was intended to be, which is if you are on this soil and you have a baby, they get to be a citizen. That's just really how that's rolling. Now, based off of the executive order that Trump signed, he was trying to make birthright citizenship be only given to those whose either birth mother or birth father are either already U.S. permanent residents or U.S. citizens. So if you didn't fit in that particular category, then that means that you were not considered a citizen, even if you were born here. Okay? The Supreme Court said not so Geronimo. Now, is it confusing that was a 5-4? It passed by a hair. And that shouldn't be the case. But this particular Supreme Court is bonkers, to say the least. They're bonkers. I was waiting for the document to come out so I'd be able to read it, but the document hasn't come out yet. But it has been reported first on NBC, and then it's been confirmed thus far Let's go. We're going to take a win when we got one. And on a Tuesday.
So today, Supreme Court decided not to end birthright citizenship. And of course, I don't want to downplay the outcome of it. Yes, this is great. Birthright citizenship has not ended. Especially me, I am a product of birthright citizenship. So, of course, I'm going to be very happy about it. But also, I want to reemphasize that we should be slow to accept the Supreme Court. This is just one ruling. This is just one ruling, and as we've seen before, their previous rulings aren't that great. And if you have any critical thinking, you would probably agree that we should not put so much faith in the Supreme Court. Especially when people like Clarence Thomas are still on there. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me it seems like every single time without fail, Clarence Thomas is voting to support Trump. That's exactly what happened today. He was one of the 3 Supreme Court justices who voted to end birthright citizenship. It's so weird. Why is he always doing that? Like, why? I would like to know, actually.
I have one request moving forward in 2026. Can we stop opening our phones to make videos about things we're not educated on, like birthright citizenship?
Hold up just a second, because I'm going to need somebody to walk me through this like I'm 5. So y'all have been out here for the longest daggone time, screaming to the high heavens that unborn babies have 0 rights when it comes to abortion. But now y'all are saying that unborn babies now have rights when it comes to their citizenship status. Is it a human life with enough power to anchor legal status in the United States of America? Make this make sense.
God have mercy upon us.
I'm gonna hold your hand when I say this. Birthright means you need to be born in order to have the right of birthright. Unborn babies are not born, so they can't legally be considered citizens because they're not born and alive on the soil. I know that's a hard concept for you to grasp, but that's what birthright citizenship means, my dear. I get in the right love pushing these regurgitated talking points as it relates to the very foundation of the things Black people have fought for in this country. But Black Americans have been in America since the 1600s. We are, in fact, as American as it gets, because that's longer than the majority of white Americans today whose families came through Ellis Island. For most of that time, we weren't just denied citizenship, we were legally denied humanity. 1857, Dred Scott, an enslaved man, sued for his freedom because his enslaver moved him to a free state. Logical, right? The Supreme Court said no, 7-2. Chief Justice Roger Taney didn't just rule against Scott. He ruled that Black people, free or enslaved, could never be citizens. His exact words, Black people had no rights, which the white man was bound to respect. One ruling, 3 massive blows. No Black citizenship, no right to sue, and slavery now could expand anywhere. Historians all agree that this single ruling made the Civil War inevitable. When the war ended, Congress had to answer a question that should have never been a question. Are the people who built, fed, and bled for this country citizens? Enter the 14th Amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. No exceptions, no asterisks. This was written specifically to kill the Dred Scott ruling. Southern states were already passing Black codes and vagrancy laws to re-enslave Black people by another name. Birthright citizenship was the legal fortress built to stop them. Birthright citizenship didn't start as an immigration policy. It was a correction, a legal forced admission that people who had been here for 200 years already were finally human beings under the law. So when you hear politicians today talking about ending birthright citizenship, understand what's actually being debated. It's not about who gets to come here. It's about whether America will undo the very law that finally recognized Black people as human.
It is a roaring decision in favor of birthright citizenship as contained within the 14th Amendment. That is despite the countervailing evidence of some of the drafters of that amendment that they did not want this to be something that would cover birthright citizenship. Now, having said that, there are very good arguments on both sides here, good faith arguments. And I'm just reading through the Roberts decision today, but it is a very comprehensive and good faith argument. What is left here is a decision for the country as to whether it wants to examine a constitutional amendment. Some countries that have had birthright citizenship got rid of it. because many of us believe it's an incredibly ill-considered policy.
Notice certain fragmentation of the room. On the left, they treat the 14th Amendment like an untouchable holy sanctuary. On the right, they panic as if our national sovereignty just collapsed into an abyss. But neither side understands the accounting. They are arguing over allegiance and domicile, while ignoring that Uncle Sam's table was engineered from day one to be governed by the text of the flag, not the status of your parents.
Birthright citizenship stands. The United States Supreme Court just struck down President Trump's attempt to get rid of it by executive order. The justices said it does not matter whether the parents of that child are here illegally or here temporarily. The 14th Amendment is clear. Those children born in the United States are citizens of the United States. Now, based on the oral arguments, this ruling is not a surprise. The ruling today, though, was 6-3, and it was written by Chief Justice John Roberts. The majority opinion was joined by the liberal justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, along with conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Justice Brett Kavanaugh concurred in part and dissented in part, and Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, and Alito dissented. Now, on his first day in office, President Trump signed an executive order called Protecting the Meaning and Value of American Citizenship. That order revoked the rights of babies born in this country to automatic U.S. citizenship. This right had been around for more than 150 years because of the 14th Amendment, and Trump's order only excluded certain babies from getting American citizenship. His order said if the baby was born to, 1, parents who were not here legally, or 2, babies born to a mother whose presence was lawful but temporary and a father who was not here legally, that baby does not get to be a U.S. citizen. The president was claiming that 5 words in the 14th Amendment allowed him to do this. The very first line of Section 1 of the 14th Amendment says, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Seems pretty clear, right? Well, Trump said not so fast. The 5 words he zeroed in on were subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Trump and his legal team made the argument that parents who are not full citizens of the United States, and by extension, their newborn babies, are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Therefore, their children are not allowed to be covered by the 14th Amendment. Well, today, the majority wrote Trump's novel theory was wrong, and that all children born in the United States, regardless of their parents' legal status, are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and the 14th Amendment is clear. They are citizens. Justice Roberts took it a step further, saying that the framers of the 14th Amendment were so adamant that all children born in the United States were citizens that they added it to the Constitution so that no president or Congress could change it unless they passed another constitutional amendment. Justice Roberts wrote of the 14th Amendment, the goal was even grander, to put the great question of citizenship beyond the legislative power altogether, to settle the issue once and for all. Now, I mentioned Justice Kavanaugh had a concurring opinion, meaning he agreed with the majority, but he also dissented on part of it. He concurred that President Trump lost this case. He said that the executive order violates the Constitution. But he said the 14th Amendment was written more than 150 years ago, and it didn't anticipate the modern practice of birth tourism or illegal immigration. Kavanaugh suggested that new exceptions to automatic citizenship could be made possible if Congress passed a new law. The majority said if Congress wants to change the 14th Amendment, they would need to get another constitutional amendment through. But Kavanaugh said a new law may be able to change it. He also says plainly that the Constitution as it's written today is clear. These kids are citizens. Justices Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch all wrote dissents. Justice Thomas said he believes Trump's executive order is legal and sided with Trump's novel idea that children born to certain people in this country illegally or temporarily are not subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. government because their parents owe political allegiance to another country, so they cannot be U.S. citizens. Justice Alito agrees that children born in the U.S. to parents who are not here legally or are here temporarily are not subject to the jurisdiction of the U.S. government, but for other reasons. And Justice Gorsuch dissented for procedural reasons and said the majority took the ruling too far. So if you want to read this massive ruling and all these dissents for yourself, I'm going to email it all out to you tonight in my Facts HQ email, which of course is free. So make sure you sign yourself up.
Trump is absolutely furious right now. Moments ago, the United States Supreme Court upheld birthright citizenship, going against Donald Trump's executive orders to end it. The 6-3 ruling means that anybody born in the United States is still a U.S. citizen. Too bad for the racist bigots.
Hey everybody, the 14th Amendment, this birthright citizenship thing, it was written for the children of slaves, not for anchor babies from illegals. If you come into this country illegally and you have a kid, that child is not an American citizen. It is just not how that's not what it was written for, that's not what it's used for. But now we've weaponized it, we've changed the language a little bit, and that's what it's used for now. But the Supreme Court just ruled against President Trump's executive order, banning birthright citizenship to illegals. They're saying the parents weren't here legally, they're not citizens. The children also shouldn't be citizens. Just because you have a kid in the United States doesn't mean you are a citizen. That was written, the 14th Amendment, it was written for the children of slaves. When slaves became citizens, they wanted to make sure that their children also became citizens. That's what it was for. These people that are illegals that have come into the country, they're not citizens. So that means that their children also should not be citizens. Absolutely disgusting what the court did. It was Roberts and Barrett that rule inside with the liberal justices. Kind of figured it would go this way, but thank goodness for the justices that stood up against the liberal justice. And so Clarence Thomas, of course, Clarence Thomas is the legend, Alito, Kavanaugh, etc. Thank goodness for them, because they apparently have some common sense and some reasoning, and they can obviously see that, hey, 14th Amendment does not apply for illegals that come into this country and have children. They can obviously, so hopefully over time the court will make a better decision. But absolutely disgusting what the court did. But we also got a really good ruling, right? We can keep men out of women's sports, so that's great. And of course, the female justices on the left side voted against. Voted against it. They're okay with men competing in women's sports. Absolutely disgusting. But in the Supreme Court, yes, we didn't get a win there. We all kind of figured we weren't going to get a win there, but the big win was that men cannot play in women's sports. Thank goodness for that, and that we can put a ban on that. Protect women's sports, protect women, because the Republicans, they are the ones that are actually protecting women. The left are not.
You know how these black Americans keep saying they have a birthright claim to their land, and that's why the United States made them citizens before Native Americans? Let's look into that, okay? Let's look into the whole issue real fast. Now, the reason why the 14th Amendment did not grant citizenship to most Native Americans is they were not considered fully subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, meaning they saw us as sovereign individuals because we were already here. And they're trying to colonize the land from us, and they're trying to find a legal way to take over the land. Colonization, right? So they wrote the Constitution and then drafted the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was granting citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the U.S., right? So it's not giving them a birthright claim to the land. It's just giving them citizenship to the land that's being colonized by a group of individuals. So the United States didn't see them as sovereign because they weren't all here. They weren't here already. Rather, the U.S. saw them as colonizers as well and gave them citizenship under the 14th Amendment, right? Now, but then the United States had to figure out a way, a legal way, to give us citizenship without giving up our rights to the land. And that's when the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924 was enacted, okay? It granted full U.S. citizenship to all Native Americans born with the United States without forcing them to give up tribal rights, tribal land rights. Get it? So the claim that these Black Americans make is totally misconstrued and falsified as usual, okay? They don't have a birthright claim to the land, okay? They were granted citizenship under the 14th Amendment because the government saw them as colonizers, which they are. If they were already here, like us Native Americans, the United States would have seen them as sovereign as well, and then had to write legislation to include them as citizens. Crazy stuff, huh?
Wow, they did it. The Supreme Court officially upheld birthright citizenship. The decision was almost 200 pages long. And if you don't understand why this ruling matters, and not just for immigrants, but for every single American, you need to hear this. I'm a lawyer. I went to Yale Law School, where I focused on constitutional law, and today the court did something that it doesn't always do. Hold the line. Okay, so a little bit of background. On day one of his second term, DJT signed an executive order aiming to end birthright citizenship for all kids born to parents who are undocumented or even just here legally on a visa. No green card, no citizenship for your baby. That was the plan. Basically, every lower court looked at that and said this is blatantly unconstitutional. And today, the Supreme Court agreed. It was a 6-3 decision, basically split up amongst liberal and conservative lines, with Chief Justice John Roberts writing the majority opinion. Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Brett Kavanaugh also joined him. And much of his reasoning was based around the modern interpretation of the 14th Amendment, the overturning of the Dred Scott decision, and this other case called Wong Kim Ark. He writes, citizenship then and now was the right to have rights, to freely participate in our political community. The framers of the 14th Amendment extended that promise to every freeborn person in this land. He ends with, we keep that promise today. Now, Justice Clarence Thomas dissented. Justice Thomas's dissent was over 90 pages long, so clearly he's passionate about this issue. Dario, why? Well, his main argument centers around a pro-Black American theory. The 14th Amendment was specifically for formerly enslaved citizens. You're not going to read the whole thing, but you need to hear the important parts, because his dissent will probably echo for decades to come. He writes, Blacks were entitled to citizenship because they were Americans. They had no other homeland, owed no other allegiance to any foreign power, and were subject to no other authority. However, the same could not be said for the children of foreign temporary visitors. Foreign temporary visitors were attached to their home country. He goes on to make another originalist argument, saying that the court is adding to the 14th Amendment in a way that the framers never designed. And I quote, the 14th Amendment, which was designed and understood to secure equal rights for freed Blacks, but has instead been repurposed for political projects that the Reconstruction Congress did not support. He closes with, I am not sure that today's opinion will stand the test of time. Citizenship clause added greatly to the dignity and glory of American citizenship. Today's opinion devalues that citizenship. I respectfully dissent. And this is not over, and it's about more than just immigration law. It's a test of whether the Constitution can be unilaterally rewritten by an executive order. Can the president redefine what it means to be an American, or change the Constitution on his own? Today the court said no, but it wasn't unanimous. DJT has already called on Congress to pass legislation to end birthright citizenship. Today was a major loss for the Don, but some would say a big win for the Constitution.
The church verdict is absolute. True citizenship is never about political theatre or corporate marketing layouts. It is about unyielding constitutional geometry. The lines have been tested. The High Court blindfolds have been removed, and the 14th Amendment stands unbroken. So, flood the comment section below and tell me if you are high IQ enough to see through the media noise, or if you are still trapped in the shallow box scores of politics. I'd love you to subscribe immediately to the Church of the Romanesco Broccoli as we clear the grid to get to 1,000 subscribers. And above all else, don't be a rounding error.